Believe it or not, fame and fortune don't always come with a clean slate. Some of the most well-known celebrities have very dark secrets. Oh my god, I can't believe it. And some of these secrets involve very deadly consequences. In this video, we'll be going over some celebrities you may or may not know who have killed people, and some in ways you'd never expect. And some of these were not criminally charged, while others were pure accidents. However, this shows that even accidents have life-changing results, ones that lead to deaths. Crime, conspiracy, cults, serial killers, and murder. All things that I love to consume, and I know you do too, you sick, twisted little beautiful intellectually minded freak. And today we are talking about just that. We are talking about celebrities. We love celebrities. Celebrities, we gobble up all the drama and whatnot, and we idolize them, we look up to them. They're like these anomalies that are untouchable, but even they can make mistakes. So let's talk about it. Without further ado, let's unbuckle our seatbelts, go Mach 5 down the highway, slam on the brakes, and bust through this windshield into these criminal celebrities together. Ryan Grantham, originally best known for his work on Diary of a Wimpy Kid to eventually reaching bigger shows like Riverdale, Supernatural, and iZombie. However, he would later be known for something much more sinister, and it wouldn't be on a movie set. All right, before I get into this, I need to put my freaking glasses on. I can't see shit. Alright, so Grantham lived with his mother, Barbara Waite, who was a very supportive and integral figure in his life. And his father, who was quite absent, left his mother at the center of his day-to-day life. And she was very supportive of his acting life as he started to get larger and larger roles, starting off as a child star in the industry. What could go wrong, right? A lot. However, as he got older, it became harder to get more and more roles, as is the business in acting. And this may or may not have inadvertently caused some mental health struggles for Grantham, which we now know from a personal diary that was found. He would write in this diary about how much he hated himself, showing his deteriorating psychological state before the crime was committed. So on March 31st, 2020 in Squamish, British Columbia, weird shout out to BC right now, Ryan Grantham carried out a premeditated murder. While his 64-year-old mother was playing piano, he approached her from the back and would shoot her in the head with a .20 caliber rifle. And this act of cold and calculated murder was something he had rehearsed beforehand. Afterwards, he used a GoPro to film his dead mother on the ground, admitting to the murder in a recorded confession. And he did express regret knowing what he had done, and his mind was completely made up. However, that wasn't the only murder he wanted to commit. And this is where it gets crazy. After her death, he didn't call the police. Instead, he spent some time at home and set up an unusual scene. He positioned his mother's body on the floor, covering her in a sheet and surrounding her with candles. So obviously a very obvious act of remorse, which little too late. Then he would go to his car and prep it and fill his car with weapons, ammunition, Molotov cocktails, and camping gear. What he had planned was to kill the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. However, in an unusual change of heart, he instead would just drive aimlessly around with all of this stuff in his car. And eventually, he thought of heading towards Simon Fraser University to do a mass which is just horrifying to think about. But yet again, thankfully, he decided not to and began to just drive again aimlessly. And it was much later and he realized that neither of these plans seemed viable, to which he drove himself and turned himself into the Vancouver police station. And he would tell them that he had killed his mother and they would arrest him. And later in March 2020, he would plead guilty to first-degree murder for life, with no chance of parole until 14 years later. And most of the information before was learned at the court case, including including the GoPro video and his diary, which explained his mental health decline and the regret he felt for killing his mother. And the video was around 4 minutes long, detailing what he was going to do. It's really sad to hear, and it shows he was going through clinical depression in the months leading up to the murder. He was feeling urges of wanting to cause harm to others, and as reported, he had been watching gore videos on the dark web as well, which also just helped fuel his urges. And he himself was wanting to take his own life and just feeling intense feelings of self-hatred. So just a really extremely sad situation. And the reason for killing his mother was basically to save her from the crimes he was going to commit. So he felt like so guilty for the crimes he wanted to commit, which would be the murder of Justin Trudeau and potentially a mass shooting at Simon Fraser University. He wanted to save her from going through seeing her son doing that, basically, which, I mean, obviously is so messed up and wrong, but there's just a little, it's just sad. It's just really, really sad. Yeah, just a really heartbreaking story and a very recent story as well. But that brings us to our next celebrity, which is Matthew Broderick. So have you seen the movie Inspector Gadget? Used to be one of my faves. Well, then you absolutely know who this guy is. And Inspector Gadget was kind of a terrible example also, by the way. He does have a much more extensive portfolio. What you should know him from was from his most popular performance, which was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, another one of my favorites growing up. This guy was basically the childhood of anyone born before 2004, or at least should have been, because those movies are fantastic. But this guy did not just skip school. He literally killed people, which is crazy to think about.
Bueller.
But born on March 21st, 1962 in Manhattan, New York City, his starting career had him climbing the ladder, jumping into films. His first big hit was the movie War Games in 1983. I never watched it. Where he was finally establishing himself on the map. And then, of course, his biggest film, arguably, Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 1986. However, just a year later, he would cause a terrible accident. On August 5th, 1987, Broderick was traveling with his co-star and also girlfriend, Jennifer Grey, in Northern Ireland. And Jennifer Grey, for those of you who don't know, was Baby in the Corner. Nobody puts Baby in the Corner. Dirty Dancing, that baby. And supposedly, while driving a rented car, he drove on the wrong side of the road. And some articles say it was because of weather conditions. However, I think the story makes more sense just because he was confused. He is an American after all, so maybe he just didn't immediately think that he was driving on the wrong side of the road, like, because the roads are opposite there. So he was driving on the wrong side of the road, but it was the right side of the road for him, if you know what I mean. Obviously, not even a little bit of an excuse for what was to happen, but, you know, arguably that may have been the reason. But because of this error, he had a head-on collision with another car, which killed 2 passengers. Margaret Doherty, who was 63, and Anna Gallagher, who was 28. And Broderick did not lose his life, but suffered a fracture to his leg and his ribs, a concussion, and a collapsed lung. Getting off easy compared to the other 2 passengers. And his passenger, Gray, got severe whiplash. Again, got off extremely easy comparatively. And after the crash, he would obviously be questioned by police, who stated he had no recollection of the crash or why he was on the wrong lane to begin with. And he then was initially charged with causing death by dangerous driving. However, he would somehow avoid this charge. Instead, he would receive a much lesser punishment for careless driving and fined around $175. $175 for 2 people's lives. I'm just speechless from that. But a sentence that could have landed him in prison, he instead received just a small fee. Basically, a parking ticket fee, basically. And this obviously caused a huge uproar, with people absolutely angry he could get away with something so serious with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. And you could still find posts making fun of him and calling him a murderer, which I don't think he meant to murder anyone, but he was careless, and by doing that, he killed two people. But anyway, this somehow did not halt his fame at all, and he would continue to star in hit movies like soon after. In one of, if not his biggest movie of our childhoods, he would play adult Simba in The Lion King in 1993. Like one of the biggest movies to happen in the 90s. His career now has slowly faltered. He's still obviously in some big movies and is still acting, but he's now in his 60s. And this is one of the deaths on the list that is really crazy to me. Maybe it's because he was in Ireland, so the courts were just more lenient. I don't know how the judicial system works over there necessarily, but it is extremely weird to me why they would give him such a small fine, especially as such a successful actor. Maybe that's why, which is just even more sick. But it's again, just incredibly sad. But that is what happened, and that is Broderick's story, and now we move on to Sid Vicious. In the mid-1970s, London's punk scene became the crucible for one of the most iconic and controversial figures in rock history. John Simon Ritchie, later known as Sid Vicious, found himself at the epicenter of this cultural revolution. Despite his limited musical prowess, Vicious' charismatic presence and embodiment of punk's rebellious spirit quickly propelled him to the prominence within the movement. And Malcolm McLaren, the astute and often provocative manager of the Sex Pistols, recognized the potential in Vicious's raw energy and persona. And in February 1977, McLaren made the strategic decision to recruit Vicious as the band's new bassist. Even though he lacked the fundamental skills to play the instrument, he was basically just, a poster boy. And the unconventional choice underscored the punk's ethos that prioritized attitude and authenticity over technical proficiency. And the iconic look that Vicious cultivated, spiked hair, leather jackets, and an air of defiance, became synonymous within the punk movement. He was just like an idol in the punk movement. And his visual presentation was as much part of his artistry as the musical contributions, if not more so. And Vicious's style influenced a generation of disaffected youth, providing a template for punk fashion that would endure long after his brief career. And his struggles with substance abuse and self-destructive tendencies became inextricably linked with his public persona. Wopple's assessment that Vicious represented the nihilistic, self-destructive, dark, completely uncaring side of punk highlighted the duality of his appeal, a figure both celebrated and cautionary. And the media's fascination with Vicious just intensified when he became romantically involved with Nancy Spungen. Their relationship, tumultuous and often public, captured the imagination of the press and public alike. The portrayal of Sid and Nancy as Romeo and Juliet in black leather romanticized their volatile partnership, further elevating Vicious's status as a cultural icon while simultaneously foreshadowing the tragedy that would ultimately unfold. So as the Sex Pistols' notoriety reached its zenith, a dark undercurrent was pulling Sid Vicious towards an even more tumultuous fate. At the heart of the tragedy was Nancy Spungen, a figure whose influence on Vicious's life would prove both profound and destructive. So in 1978, Vicious and Spungen relocated to New York City, a move that exacerbated their already problematic drug use. And eyewitness accounts from the time at Chelsea Hotel paint a very grim picture of their lifestyle. The couple was frequently observed in a state of disarray. Their room was littered in refuse, both heavily under the influence of heroin as well. And this environment of squalor and substance abuse just became the backdrop for this tragic event that would unfold. So on October 12th, 1978, the situation reached its tragic peak when Nancy Spungen was discovered dead in the couple's room at the Chelsea Hotel. She had sustained a fatal stab wound to the abdomen, and the circumstances surrounding her death remained shrouded in controversy to this day. And Vicious, who was present at the scene, initially confessed to the murder. However, later he would retract his statement, claiming to have been asleep at the time of Spungen's death. And eyewitness accounts from the Chelsea Hotel provide a nuanced perspective on Vicious's and Spungen's relationship. Their interactions were characterized by a volatile mix of adoration and violence, a very extremely toxic an unhealthy relationship. While Vicious was known to physically abuse Spungen, he also displayed a very deep affection for her. And this paradoxical dynamic complicates the narrative of their relationship and the events leading to Spungen's death. And in the aftermath of Spungen's death, Vicious spiraled further into despair and self-destruction, and he would attempt slewer slide shortly after the incident, a clear indication of his mental anguish. And despite being released on bail, Vicious was unable to escape the gravitational pull of his addiction. And on February 2nd, 1979, he would be found dead from a heroin overdose, bringing a very tragic end to his tumultuous life before he could stand trial for Spungen's death. So we will never know how she died or how the whole thing unfolded. So again, just a very, very tragic event. Now that brings us to our next celebrity, which I'm sure every single one of you will know, and that is Caitlyn Jenner. So Caitlyn Jenner is another one of these tragic tales. Once a famed Olympic star to one surrounded by multiple dramas. However, her previous skills as a decathlon world record holder later became a media sensation. And carrying the Jenner title, Caitlyn Jenner is obviously directly associated with the Kardashians, once married to Kris Jenner. And everyone remembers the horrors of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. The show is still going, which is crazy to me. However, this once star full of global success had a horrible accident that resulted in the loss of a life. On February 7th, 2015, Jenner was driving on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California. You've definitely driven down this road in GTA 5. But driving a black Cadillac Escalade, which was towing a trailer, another vehicle ahead of Jenner was driven by a woman by the name of Kim Howe, who was 69, driving her Lexus, eyes focused on the road. However, the woman in front of Howe had slowed down, driven by a woman named Jessica Steindorf. And because of this, Howe would brake, but Jenner was going too fast. And estimated to be going between 38 to 46 miles per hour, Jenner would rear-end Howe's Lexus, pushing her into oncoming traffic. And the Lexus was then struck in a head-on collision by a Hummer, killing Kim Howe on the scene. And to make matters worse, Jenner also hit that Prius that was in front of Howe. And with no injuries at all, Jenner stayed at the scene, knowing that this was very, very serious. Police would then force Jenner to take a sobriety test and would question her. However, Jenner was not intoxicated, and surveillance footage showed that Jenner was neither texting nor using her phone whatsoever. And I'm not sure exactly how they would tell this from video, but I guess it was slowed down, but what do I know, you know? So she was in her legit legal right, but despite it, she was given criminal charges. And in September 2015, the LA District Attorney's Office declined to file charges against her, stating that there was no gross negligence and lack of criminal intent. Although this was not charged federally, Jenner was part of 3 civil suits from each of the vehicles. One of the stepchildren from Howe who had no living relatives, the Prius owner Jessica Steindorf, and the Hummer driver. And all of these were settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. But we later learned that the Hummer family, that of the Wolf Melices, sued her upwards of $800,000. No doubt an amount that would help pay off the emotional toll of being involved in the death of Kim Howe. So it seems as though money just fixed this entire situation, and it was shoved under the rug. I mean, it was in the tabloids, but I mean, I never even heard of it, and I was alive during all this. I was an adult. So, I don't know. It smells fishy, but I can't. I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm just the reporter. I'm just the middleman. I'm just telling you all the facts. And next up, I believe a lot of you will be familiar with, if you're around my age, 10 years younger, 10 years older, I feel like you would have seen this guy's face before, but it is Phil Lewis. Born on February 14th, 1968, he began his career acting in various films and shows. However, his career would be cemented into fame by his performance on the popular Disney Channel show, The Sweet Life of Zac and Cody, one of my favorite shows shows as a kid, as the character Mr. Mosby, the hotel manager for the location of the show, the Tipton Hotel. And the show was so successful and able to have around 3 seasons that it eventually was continued through a spin-off, The Suite Life on Deck, which also one of my favorite shows as a kid, which was a majority of the same cast except on the cruise ship named the SS Tipton. And this show also ran for about 3 seasons, and he would continue to work on other projects as the time went on. And he was able to direct some episodes of The Suite Life and even directed episodes of the alternative shows such as Ant Farm, Austin and Ally, Good Luck Charlie, Kickin' It, and Jessie. So very prominent in the Disney world. So he was a staple of many childhoods, including my own. And there were frequent moments in that show that many can reference back to. For me, it was the Prindle scene. Like, I know it was Brenda's song, but it was also him. I don't know why that scene is like caked into my memory, and I was a big fan of Mr. Mosby.
Are you referring to the shift lever that says PRNDL?
That's a child's Mosby. I know how to spell Prindle.
However, Mr. Mosby, aka Phil Lewis, actually had a bit of a darker past before the running of these shows, one that many seem to forget. So on December 28th, 1991, Phil Lewis was involved in a fatal drunk driving accident in Bethesda, Maryland. He was still young, only 23 years old at the time, and was just an aspiring actor. The crash would result in the death of a 21-year-old Isabel Dorate, a recent immigrant who moved to the US to work as a nanny. And her injuries were fatal, and she was pronounced dead shortly after the crash. And the charges for these were manslaughter and driving under the influence, a DUI, and his blood alcohol was about the legal limit, therefore leading to the charges of vehicular manslaughter, which he completely accepted. And in 1993, he was then sentenced to 5 years in prison, although he only served 1 behind bars. So instead, he was forced to do 300 plus hours of community service. And this wasn't the classic pick up trash on the side of the road, but instead working at a prison-based theater to help educate them about the dangers of driving while intoxicated, which I think is great. You know, like, I mean, something so awful that happened, and that was clearly his fault and his doing. He is trying to make into something, or he did try to make into something that was, you know, relatively positive. And this helped repair his damaged public image and allowed him to continue to do stuff he loved to do, which was acting. And he was eventually able to build his career back from the ground up. Again, eventually leading him into 2 popular shows and other appearances on Disney and Nickelodeon. And the crime he committed was over 10 years ago in the past when he began acting on The Suite Life of Zac and Cody. Although a tragic tale, I feel he eventually did redeem himself. And although this act of violence probably haunts him to this day, I'm glad he could become a staple of many of our childhoods and do some good in the system as well. And he's still doing some directing here and there, helping direct a few episodes in 2024 of a sitcom called Papa's House. And in 2023, he was in a sitcom called The Really Loud House as Mr. Rickshaw. So it seems his career is at a bit of a standstill, but hopefully he's happy. And next we have Ted Kennedy. So as most of you will know, the tragic tales of the Kennedys is a long one. Many of them died or been assassinated, and tons of conspiracy theories around their deaths still exist and are frequently talked about till this day. However, one of the deaths involves the uncle of RFK Jr., Ted Kennedy. Except he wouldn't be the one to lose his life. Edward Ted Kennedy was born February 22nd, 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts. He is best known for not only being a Kennedy, but his career as a US senator. And he was actually one of the longest serving senators in US history, which is insane, especially for a Kennedy given their bad luck. But on the evening of July 18th, 1969, Ted Kennedy attended a private party on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. I don't know if I said that right. The party was a reunion for the Boiler Room Girls, a group who worked on Robert F. Kennedy's presidential campaign before his assassination. So around 11:15 p.m., Mary Jo Kopechny, a 28-year-old former campaign worker and close associate of RFK's, would leave the party with him. Anyway, the two would leave the party together, and supposedly they were driving back on the ferry dock so she could get back to her hotel. And instead of the main road, he drove her down a narrow and dangerous unlit dirt path. He then suddenly lost control and went off the bridge into the pond below, the car flipping upside down into the water and submerging his passenger. And he was able to escape, but his passenger continued to be trapped. Mary Jo. And according to himself, he dove in 7 or 8 times hoping to save her, but couldn't get her from how the vehicle was situated. He then decided to swim to shore and just left the scene, leaving Mary Jo Kopechne behind to die. And he just would return back to his hotel like nothing ever happened. So like you may think like maybe he's in shock. You know, maybe it's a hereditary situation, you know, the backseat girl dies, gets decapitated. Don't know if you've seen that movie before. Highly recommend watching it. But he just doesn't tell anybody and he's just in shock the whole time. So maybe he's in shock. Maybe he'll let everybody know in the morning. But no, he doesn't. He just went back to his hotel and just still didn't report the accident that happened. Not until 2 fishermen supposedly spotted the upside down car and called the police. So it wasn't him that contacted the police, it was 2 fishermen. And this is what's fucked up, okay? According to investigators studying the scene, an air pocket was discovered, which would have gave Kopechne enough time to survive if authorities were called immediately and not, you know, you just go into your hotel and just not telling anyone. So he literally had a chance to save her and didn't. And on July 25th, a week later, he pled guilty to leaving the scene of the crime and he was sentenced to 2 months in jail. And if you think that wasn't a lot of time, the sentence was actually just suspended altogether and he just served no time. Justice. And knowing this would damage his career, instead of leaving the Senate, he continued to run and stated he would run for re-election the next year. And in 1980, he would run for president. However, his life had been stained with his career-destroying story, which ultimately led to a dominating defeat. But still, he did do well in the Senate and unfortunately passed away from brain cancer on August 25th, 2009. But the entire topic is debated if it was a deliberate murder or if he was hiding something. Was it an affair? Did he have secrets to hide? We just don't know, and I don't think we ever will. So again, extremely unfortunate. Now, last but not least, or maybe least, I don't really know. I don't know. Last and unfortunately, we have someone who I'm assuming everyone knows, and one of the most recent ones, which is Alec Baldwin. And if you don't know who Alec Baldwin is, his real name is Alexander Ray Baldwin III. That's a lot of name. And he was born on April 3rd, 1958, and rose to fame in countless movies. He has that certain look and tone that stands out in movies, at least for me. I mean, he's got like that stare that he always does, and he talks like very soft and very fast and very... this is I'm like turning into Jeff Goldblum right now. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna stop. But he became a bit more established in his role in The Hunt for Red October, made in 1990, alongside Sean Connery. And his fame grew through the movie Beetlejuice, playing one of the main characters, and his career just continued to skyrocket as he gained more and more roles in Hollywood. But of course, his most famous performance was in the live-action 2003 Cat in the Hat, which is the reason we don't have any more live-action Dr. Seuss movies. I personally liked it. I personally liked Cat in the Hat, okay? Mike Myers, he was good. I think it was good. But anyway, he has a plethora of movies. You definitely know who he is. But what you may or may not know, if you don't deep dive into anything celebrity, is that Alec Baldwin got a role in a movie called Rust. A Western movie, to be specific, which would come out in 2024. I never saw it. And in this movie, Alec Baldwin plays the main character, Harland Rust, in Aging Outlaw. And the story was about this outlaw, Harland Rust, who came out of hiding to rescue a 13-year-old nephew after he was sentenced to hang for his crimes he accidentally committed. And it's a cool idea, and it began filming in 2020 and 2021. However, everything would come to a screeching halt after a horrible accident. In October of 2021, there were many problems on set. The budget of the film was around $8 million, which was not your regular budget for a movie. There were complaints of safety concerns from those in the production, poor firearm handling procedures, and even accidental firearm discharges. Very bad. And this would become reality, as on October 21st, 2021, an accidental firearm discharge would take someone's life. And during a rehearsal, during a church scene, Baldwin was meant to be armed and draw his .45 Colt revolver. And everything was going to plan, and this scene involved him pointing his firearm at the camera for a dramatic shot when the gun went off accidentally. And standing behind the camera were his co-director, Joel Souza, and cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins. And the bullet supposedly hitting Hutchins in the chest where it passed through her, then hitting Souza in the shoulder. And this bullet was a live round, which is wild as to why it was ever on set and how the mix-up even happened, because that is just never the case. You don't have live rounds on set. And Souza would survive, however, Hutchins would pass away in the hospital. And an investigation was open on set trying to understand how the mix-up could have happened and how so much neglect would be involved with having a live round on set. And according to the story, Baldwin stated he never pulled the trigger, practicing gun safety. However, other reports stated he had no idea how to handle the firearm in the first place, as he's been pretty vocal about his distaste for guns. And the armorer on set was also investigated, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, and assistant David Hulse. And they both stated that the weapon was prepped and given to Baldwin cold, meaning safe, and then handed it to Baldwin. However, it was found it was not properly checked if it was truly safe. And this then just created a domino effect of lawsuits and allegations towards Baldwin, calling him a cold-blooded killer while pointing the finger at the armorer and those on set for the mistake that cost someone their life. And in January of 2023, both Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed were charged with involuntary manslaughter. However, later the same year, in April, his charges were dropped but could still be refiled. And prosecutors reopened the case and reinstated that manslaughter charge in 2024. And on top of that, he received civil lawsuits from Hutchins' family for her wrongful death. And several crew members on set also joined in, stating that they suffered emotional trauma under these working conditions and experiencing someone being killed in front of them. And some were settled privately, while others ultimately are still ongoing. And in July of 2024, Alec Baldwin stood trial for the killing, and the judge ultimately dismissed the case. He was not charged and therefore walked away a free man. However, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in March of 2024. And this obviously angered a lot of people. However, it's hard to see how he was at fault for sure. Sure, he could have examined the weapon himself, but if he was handed a live round, which shouldn't have been there in the first place and was declared safe, he felt there was no reason to check, let alone probably didn't know how to check, especially since he had a disdain towards guns. So it's very gray and confusing and just fucking sad. So it may seem unfair, and a lot of people talking about his case are demanding justice. And I'm sure this is a massive hit on his name, and the feelings of killing someone are definitely going to always be on his mind. I mean, awful all around. Like, I feel so horrible for all the people that were involved in that whole project. And it's just the negligence, like, just so easily avoidable. And there could have been a woman still walking here on Earth with us if those people were negligent. So just incredibly sad. But these cases just show even riches and fame don't always grant you immunity from tragedy. And sometimes they do, which is really horrifying. But some were tragic accidents, while others were deeper and were struggling with personal demons. Either way, all of them were extremely sad and tragic, and that is it for this video. So let me know what other videos you guys want to see down below. I appreciate you watching, I appreciate you being here, and I hope you stay safe. And until next time, I will see your beautiful face. Bye.